Picture this. You're standing in a Dodge dealership in 2012. The parking lot is full of minivans and Journey crossovers. The most exciting thing on the showroom floor is a Charger RT with 370 horsepower. Meanwhile, Ford's cranking out 662 horsepower Shelby GT500s, Chevy's dropping 580 horsepower Camaro ZL1s. And Dodge? They're trying to convince you that a Dart is somehow connected to their muscle car heritage. The company that invented the modern muscle car was dying a slow, boring death. Then someone at Chrysler did something insane. They greenlit an engine so powerful, so excessive, so utterly ridiculous that it would either save the company or destroy it completely. 707 horsepower from the factory, with a warranty, in a car you could finance for 84 months. This is the story of how one engine didn't just save Dodge, it turned them into the last true rebels of the automotive world. To understand how desperate Dodge was, we need to rewind to 2008. The financial crisis had just body-slammed the auto industry. Chrysler declared bankruptcy, got bought by Fiat, lost Plymouth, nearly lost everything. The bean counters took over. Platform sharing became religion. Every new model had to check boxes for fuel economy, safety ratings, global markets. The result? A lineup so bland it made Toyota look exciting. The 2008 Challenger had given them a glimmer of hope. Retro styling, decent power. Nostalgic buyers lined up, but by 2012 the honeymoon was over. The Challenger was heavy, slow by modern standards. The Camaro was destroying it in sales. The Mustang was evolving while the Challenger stood still. Dodge market share had dropped to 3.8%. Their average buyer age was climbing past 55. Young enthusiasts saw Dodge as their grandfather's brand. Something had to change. Enter Tim Kuniskis. Former engineer turned executive, the guy who understood that Dodge wasn't just a car company. It was supposed to be an attitude, a middle finger to convention. In late 2011, he walked into a meeting with the SRT engineering team and asked a simple question. What would it take to build the most powerful muscle car engine ever offered to the public? The engineers thought he was joking. The EPA was tightening emissions. CAFE standards were crushing performance. Everyone was downsizing, turbocharging, hybridizing, and this guy wants to build a bigger, angrier V8? Here's where it gets interesting. The SRT team had actually been playing with something in secret. They called it Project Hellcat. Started as a skunk works experiment. What happens if you take the 6.2-liter Hemi architecture and push it to the absolute limit? Not for racing, not for limited production, for something any idiot with decent credit could buy and daily drive. The base was the Apache 392 Hemi, already a solid engine, 470 horsepower, naturally aspirated. But the Hellcat team threw everything out except the basic architecture, new forged pistons, forged connecting rods, forged crankshaft. The crank alone was a masterpiece, gun-drilled for oil passages, nitride hardened, balanced to aerospace tolerances. This thing could handle 650 pound-feet of torque at the crank throws, every single day. The block got reinforced everywhere, bulkheads between cylinders thickened by 20%. Billet steel main-bearing caps torqued to 70 pound-feet with side bolts. The cooling system was insane, dual cooling circuits, one for the block, one for the heads, oil jets spraying the underside of each piston. Total cooling capacity, 1.7 gallons per minute at full throttle. That's more flow than some racing engines. But the real magic was the supercharger. IHI twin-screw positive displacement, 2.4 liters of displacement. That's bigger than most four-cylinder engines. At full boost, this thing moved 30,000 liters of air per minute. The rotors spun at 14,600 RPM. The bearing system alone cost more than most turbocharger kits. Integral liquid cooling. Three-stage intercooling system. The blower housing was cast from 356 T6 aluminum, the same stuff they use for aerospace components. Here's what made this different from every other high-horsepower build. Dodge wasn't building a race engine. They were building something your grandmother could drive to church. It had to start at -40 Fahrenheit. It had to idle smooth at 850 RPM. It had to pass emissions in California. It had to survive 125,000 miles of warranty coverage. The testing was brutal. 24 hours at wide-open throttle on the dyno. 300 consecutive drag strip launches. Heat-soaked testing in Death Valley. Cold start testing in Alaska. They destroyed 47 prototype engines, finding the limits. Melted pistons, scattered rods, lifted heads. Each failure taught them something. Stronger rings, better coatings, revised cooling passages. The fuel system was completely reimagined. Dual fuel pumps, 8 high-flow injectors, return-style system to keep fuel cool. At full throttle, this engine consumed 1.5 gallons per minute. Think about that. You could literally watch the fuel gauge drop during a quarter-mile run. But here's the kicker. The engine made too much power. Early dyno pulls showed 750 horsepower. The ZF 8-speed automatic started eating itself. The differential turned into metallic soup. The half shafts twisted like pretzels. They had to detune it, add restrictions, limit boost. The production version was capped at 707 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque. Not because the engine couldn't make more, because everything behind it would explode. The Challenger SRT Hellcat debuted at the 2014 New York Auto Show. Dodge's press conference was scheduled against Mercedes and BMW. Nobody cared about the Germans that day. 707 horsepower, most powerful production V8 ever. 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds. Quarter mile in 11.2 seconds at 125 miles per hour. Top speed, 199 miles per hour. In a car that looked like it drove straight out of 1970. The price was the real shock, $59,995. That's it. You could buy 707 horsepower for less than a base Porsche 911, less than a BMW M5, hell, less than a loaded F-150. The automotive media lost their minds. Every publication wanted one. Every YouTube channel needed content. The burnout videos started immediately. But Dodge wasn't done. 2 months later, they announced the Charger Hellcat, a 4-door family sedan with 707 horsepower, top speed of 204 miles per hour, making it the fastest production sedan in the world, faster than an Audi RS7, faster than a Mercedes E63 AMG, for half the price. The initial production run was supposed to be limited, maybe 2,500 units total, collectors only. Dodge received 9,000 orders in the first 3 months. Dealers were adding $20,000 markups. People were flying across the country to find one at MSRP. The Hellcat had become more than an engine. It was a phenomenon. Let me put the performance in perspective. The Hellcat engine produced 11.4 horsepower per liter. In 2015, the Bugatti Veyron made 11.8 horsepower per liter with 4 turbochargers and 16 cylinders. The Ferrari 458 Speciale, 133 horsepower per liter, but naturally aspirated and revving to 9,000 RPM. The Hellcat did it with a pushrod V8 that traced its roots to the 1950s. The supercharger alone was an engineering marvel. The rotors were twisted at 160 degrees of helix, manufactured to tolerances of 30 millionths of an inch. The gap between rotors, 4 thousandths of an inch. Any thermal expansion would cause them to collide. So IHI developed a proprietary coating, abradable but heat-resistant. Rotors could actually touch a temperature without damage. The intercooling system pumped coolant through 2 heat exchangers, one in front of the radiator, one built into the intake manifold. Total cooling capacity dropped intake temperatures by 140 degrees Fahrenheit, from 350 degrees at the blower outlet to 210 degrees at the intake valve. Still hot, but cool enough to prevent detonation on 91-octane pump gas. The oiling system was race-derived, 7-quart capacity, oil cooler standard, variable displacement oil pump. At full throttle, oil pressure hit 80 psi. The windage tray had trap doors, one-way valves that let oil drain back, but prevented it from splashing during hard acceleration. The oil pan itself was structural, Part of the block's rigidity came from that cast aluminum pan. The valve train seems simple, pushrod operated, 2 valves per cylinder. Old school, right? Wrong. The pushrods were one-piece forged steel. The rocker arms were investment cast from 86/20 steel. The valve springs could handle 0.571 inches of lift without coil bind. This thing revved to 6,200 RPM reliably, day after day, with hydraulic lifters that never needed adjustment. Here's something nobody talks about. The Hellcat engine was smart, really smart. NOx sensors in each cylinder bank, dual wideband oxygen sensors, manifold pressure sensors before and after the throttle body. The ECU monitored everything 100 times per second. It could detect detonation before it happened. Pull timing in individual cylinders, adjust fuel trim on the fly, add or subtract boost based on intake air temperature. The engine had different calibrations for different scenarios. Valet mode limited it to 450 horsepower. Black key mode gave you 500 horsepower. Red key mode unleashed all 707. The ECU even learned your driving style. Aggressive drivers got sharper throttle response. Gentle drivers got smoother power delivery. It adapted continuously. Warranty claims were shockingly low, less than 0.3% failure rate in the first year. That's better than most naturally aspirated engines. Dodge had somehow built a 700 horsepower engine more reliable than their old 3.6-liter Pentastar V6. The cultural impact was immediate. The Hellcat became a meme. Instagram was flooded with burnout videos. YouTubers raced them against everything. Hennessy strapped one to a dyno and made 1,000 horsepower with bolt-ons. The engine had its own merchandise line, T-shirts, keychains, coffee mugs with the Hellcat logo. But here's the real genius. The Hellcat didn't just sell Hellcats, it sold everything Dodge made. Showroom traffic increased 40%. People came to see the Hellcat and left with Charger RTs. Challenger sales jumped 61%. Even Journey sales went up. The Hellcat had given Dodge something priceless: relevance. Soon the engine started spreading. 2018 Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk, 707 horsepower in an SUV, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Towing capacity of 7,200 pounds. It was absurd, it was excessive, it was perfect. Jeep sold every one they could build. 2021 Ram TRX, Hellcat engine in a pickup truck. 702 horsepower because Ram wanted their own number. 35-inch tires, long travel suspension. It was built to destroy the Ford Raptor. And it did. Motor Trend's Truck of the Year. Every automotive award possible. Another sales success. Then came the variants. Hellcat Red Eye. 797 horsepower from a revised supercharger and strengthened internals. Demon, 840 horsepower on race gas. Superstock, Jailbreak. Each pushing further into insanity. Each one sold out immediately. The Hellcat engine transformed Dodge's image completely. They went from the company nobody talked about to the company everyone argued about. Too much power? Too dangerous? Too irresponsible? Dodge didn't care. They leaned into it. Their marketing became more aggressive, more unapologetic. Domestic, not domesticated. The brotherhood of muscle. They knew exactly who they were. The competition tried to respond. Ford built the Shelby GT500, 760 horsepower, but supercharged with a crossplane crank. More sophisticated but less character. Chevy's Camaro ZL1, 650 horsepower, lighter, better handling. But missing the Hellcat's pure insanity. Neither captured the public imagination like the Hellcat. Let's talk about the elephant in the room: fuel economy. The Hellcat got 13 miles per gallon city, 22 highway if you had superhuman restraint. Most owners saw single digits. Dodge didn't apologize. They put a yellow fuel door on it, made it a feature, not a bug. Feed the Cat became a rallying cry. The environmentalists hated it. California tried to ban it. Europe wouldn't even let it be imported. Dodge didn't care. They knew their market. American enthusiasts who wanted one last taste of excess before everything went electric, and those enthusiasts responded with their wallets. By 2023, Dodge had sold over 50,000 Hellcat-powered vehicles. Each one basically printed money. The margin on a Hellcat engine was enormous. Development costs amortized over huge production volumes, the same basic engine in 5 different vehicles. It was brilliant business. But the real value wasn't in sales, it was in brand equity. Dodge went from irrelevant to iconic. Their social media engagement increased 400%. They had the youngest average buyer age growth in the industry. The Hellcat had made Dodge cool again. The engine also preserved jobs. The Brampton assembly plant in Canada, the Kokomo transmission plant in Indiana, the Saltillo engine plant in Mexico, thousands of UAW workers employed building these monsters. In an era of outsourcing and automation, the Hellcat was proudly North American. Even the end was legendary. 2023 announcement, Last Call Special Editions. Dodge was killing the Hellcat to go electric. The collector market went insane. Final edition cars selling for $200,000 over sticker. People paying Ferrari money for a Dodge. Because they knew this was the end of an era. The Hellcat's legacy is complicated. It appeared at the exact moment the world was pivoting to efficiency, when Tesla was revolutionizing transportation, when climate change dominated headlines, and Dodge built the antithesis of all that, a giant middle finger to progress, and it worked. It proved something important. Emotion still sells cars, not spreadsheets, not efficiency ratings, not safety scores. Emotion. The feeling you get when 707 horsepower pins you to the seat, the sound of that supercharger screaming, the smell of vaporized rubber, that's what people remember. That's what they'll tell their grandchildren about. The Hellcat saved Dodge by reminding them who they were. Not a company that built sensible vehicles for sensible people, a company that built dreams for dreamers, power for the powerless, rebellion for rebels. In a world going increasingly digital, automated, and sanitized, the Hellcat was analog, manual, and raw. Think about it. In 20 years, when everything's autonomous and electric, what will collectors want? Another Tesla? Another crossover? Or will they want the last great American V8, the engine that refused to go quietly, the motor that literally shook the ground when it started? The Hellcat didn't just save Dodge from irrelevance, it guaranteed their immortality. Long after the electric transition, long after autonomous vehicles, long after we've forgotten what gasoline smells like, people will remember the Hellcat. They'll remember when one company decided to build the impossible. When 707 horsepower wasn't enough, so they built 797, then 807, then 840, each iteration more ridiculous than the last. That's the Hellcat legacy, not efficiency, not responsibility, not playing it safe, but pushing boundaries until they shatter, building what shouldn't be built, selling what shouldn't exist, and making the world a more interesting place because of it. The last Hellcat rolled off the assembly line in December 2023. End of production, end of an era. But not the end of the story, because every Hellcat on the road is now a rolling piece of history, a reminder of when one engine saved a company by being exactly what it shouldn't be: excessive, unnecessary, and absolutely perfect. What's the most powerful engine you've ever experienced? Was it the numbers that impressed you or the feeling? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most important engines in American history, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started exploring the machines that changed everything. Until next time, keep that throttle wide open.